There is nothing quite as revealing as watching a narcissist's true nature come spilling out the moment they feel beaten by you, the moment they sense they are somehow lesser in comparison and realize deep down that there is nothing they can do to actually bring you down. That is exactly when they turn childish, reactive, almost impulsive in a way that would embarrass them if they had any real self-awareness left. It is in that exact moment that all their insecurity comes pouring out into the open, and they respond by reaching for petty little mind games, the kind we are going to walk through together in this episode. I am Danish, working in narcissistic abuse recovery, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering 5 specific things a narcissist tends to do the moment they feel genuinely defeated by you. If that sounds like something worth understanding, stick around until the end because it only gets more interesting from here. Before we get into the list itself, I think it is worth pausing on why defeat hits a narcissist so differently than it hits the rest of us. For most people, losing an argument, watching an ex move on successfully, realizing someone else was right all along, these things sting, but they do not shatter the foundation of who we are. We absorb the discomfort, we adjust, we move forward. For a narcissist, there is no foundation solid enough to absorb that kind of blow, because their entire sense of self was never built on anything internal to begin with. It was built entirely on external validation, on being seen as superior, correct, admired, untouchable. So when defeat arrives, when you prove to be right, capable, thriving without them, it does not just bruise their ego, it threatens the entire fragile structure holding their identity together. That is exactly why the reactions that follow feel so disproportionate, so petty, so oddly desperate. They are not simply annoyed. They are fighting for psychological survival in the only way they know how. Keep that underlying dynamic in mind as we walk through each of these 5 patterns because it reframes everything. You are not watching someone who simply lost gracefully and is having a slightly rough week. You are watching someone whose entire self-concept is under threat, scrambling to patch a structure that was never built to withstand this kind of pressure in the first place. The first thing they do is become almost obsessively fixated on proving you wrong. Why does this happen? Because somewhere inside, they already know you are right, and that knowledge is unbearable to them. So they build themselves a kind of false sense of safety instead. Whatever you do, they will try to do the exact opposite. Every move you make gets met with some kind of counter move on their end. In their head, you are locked in this constant battle with them, except you are not actually there. You are not even thinking about them most of the time. But in their own distorted reality, the fight is very much alive and ongoing. They want desperately to feel involved in your life somehow, even from a distance, which is really just a form of living vicariously through a version of you they do not actually have access to anymore. They know you are genuinely thriving. They know you understand something inside and out that they simply cannot reach the same level of understanding on. They cannot outsmart you, they cannot outperform you, so instead they do something twisted, they compare themselves to you and then convince themselves they are somehow one step ahead anyway, that they know better, that they have lived more life and understand things you could not possibly grasp yet. Here is a clear example of how this plays out. When a narcissist decides to counterparent, what is actually happening underneath that behavior? They are trying to prove you wrong, plain and simple, because they are deeply insecure about their own parenting and they know it. They know somewhere inside that they are the kind of parent who shows up occasionally with treats and excitement, but has no real interest in the actual work of raising a child day to day. So if you create structure in your child's life, that particular kind of narcissist will go out of their way to tear that structure down. You tell your child they need to do homework, brush their teeth, stay organized, get to bed on time, and this parent will make absolutely sure the opposite happens under their roof. No homework gets done, hygiene falls apart, sleep and meals go out the window entirely. And they will tell your child, it is fine, you can do whatever you want at my place. I am not like your other parent. I do not want to be so strict with you. Sounds generous on the surface, does it not? All that freedom, except what that actually does is feed the most fragile, ego-driven part of a child's still developing personality, shaping them into someone who constantly craves instant gratification. And then that child starts to rebel against the parent actually doing the harder, more responsible work, saying things like, why are you so strict? Why can't you be more like the other one? When this happens, it's often because the narcissistic person recognizes that your behavior has changed in a way they can no longer easily influence. Instead of reacting the way you once did, you're setting boundaries, staying calm, or refusing to engage in familiar patterns. That shift can make them feel as though they're losing control over the dynamic. To protect their self-image and maintain a sense of superiority, they may try to convince both themselves and the people around them that they are still in control, that they understand the situation better than anyone else, and that they are always one step ahead. Rather than acknowledging that your new approach is affecting them, they may dismiss it, minimize it, or create a narrative that makes them appear wiser or more powerful. This isn't necessarily because they truly believe they have the upper hand, but because preserving that image is important to them. By projecting confidence and certainty, they attempt to regain influence, protect their ego, and avoid confronting the uncomfortable reality that their usual tactics are no longer producing the results they expect. Their real intention underneath all of it is to sabotage your effort because they are envious of you and jealous of the fact that you are doing the harder, more meaningful work well. And the tragedy in all of this, the part that so often gets overlooked, is that the child caught in the middle pays the real price for this power struggle. They are not fighting for the child's well-being at all, despite whatever language they use to dress it up. They are fighting to win a battle against you, using the child as the battlefield, which is one of the more painful realities of dealing with a co-parent who operates this way. Here's a second example. A cheating narcissist comes to you and tries to intellectually bully you into submission. They will say something like, "Have you even read the book that explains how cheating is actually part of human nature, how we are supposed to do it as part of our spiritual growth?" There genuinely are books out there that make that kind of argument, and they will wave one in your face along with some research paper, twisting the actual findings to fit whatever justification they need in that moment. They pick and choose whatever fragments of information serve their narrative and discard the rest. They will take something you actually said and warp it into something completely different in order to gaslight you, to make you feel small, insignificant, like nothing in comparison to them. They act as though they know everything there is to know. And they engage in a lot of virtue signaling whenever you try to call out their behavior. They might not brag outright about their own accomplishments, but they will say things like, "I have been doing this for years. This is your first child. I already have 2 children from my previous relationship, so do not lecture me about parenting. I have been doing this far longer than you have." That kind of virtue signaling is, again, a clear signal of a narcissist whose ego has just taken a hit. It is worth naming what is actually happening underneath these tactics, because on the surface, they can sound almost reasonable, almost like a legitimate difference of opinion. But strip away the borrowed research and the credentials they wave around, and what you are left with is someone who cannot tolerate being wrong, who would rather twist reality itself than sit with the discomfort of your accuracy. That inability to simply say you might have a point is one of the clearest markers of the pattern we are talking about today. The second thing they do is become intensely competitive. Let me just say it plainly because there is no gentler way to put it. Narcissists are essentially possessed by a demonic spirit of competition. That is genuinely what it looks like from the outside. It is not that this spirit forces their actions exactly, but it fuels everything they do. It whispers constantly in their ear, and the narcissist listens every single time. I say this not to be dramatic for the sake of it, but because after years of working with people recovering from this exact dynamic, the language of possession genuinely captures something that clinical terminology alone cannot quite reach, the sense that you are watching someone respond to an impulse that seems to override whatever reasonable, grounded version of themselves might otherwise exist. They cannot stomach the reality that you are further along in your journey, that you know more than they do, that you have become someone others look to for inspiration. Instead, they secretly, and sometimes not so secretly, measure themselves against you and then throw themselves into competing. And this comparison is never about getting honest, useful feedback. It is never about thinking, okay, I could grow in that direction too. Of course not. Underneath it all, they feel a deep subconscious shame because they believe that whatever you have built, whatever progress you have made in your life, should somehow belong to them instead, whether they actually put in the work for it or not. So what do they do about that shame? Here is where it gets genuinely strange. They copy the exact things you do and then claim those things as their own idea. It is a deeply twisted, almost sick kind of mind game. If you point it out, if you say, that is something I came up with, that is how I parent, that is my approach, they will respond with total arrogance, something like, I am just showing you how to actually do it properly. Even when caught red-handed, say openly copying your entire personality or your way of doing things, they will twist the narrative and claim they were simply demonstrating a better version of what you were already doing, implying they know more, which is really just another layer of their delusions of grandeur. They will apply for the exact same job at the exact same company just to prove to you that you are not somehow special, that they can get there too. They will move into the exact same apartment community, the exact same building even, if you happen to live somewhere upscale, whether or not they can genuinely afford to live there, all just to say, look, I am not less than you. They might even start copying your style of dress. Say you show up to an event wearing a particular outfit, and suddenly at the very next gathering, that narcissist shows up wearing the same colors, the same brand, Everything mirrored right down to the last detail. And how do they justify it to themselves? They will say something like, I am just showing everyone how that outfit is actually supposed to be worn. That is the truly bizarre part. They will even insult you in the process, saying something like, it did not look good on you because your body type is wrong for it, too heavy, too thin, whatever critique fits the moment, and then claim they have the figure to really display how the outfit was meant to look. This is nothing but false arrogance, wounded ego, and entitlement speaking through them. It would almost be funny if it were not so revealing of just how little internal substance is holding the whole act together, this constant need to physically occupy the same spaces, wear the same things, chase the same milestones, purely as a way of proving something to a person who, more often than not, was not even thinking about them in that moment. But if you have done enough healing work yourself, you can actually sit back and watch this entire performance unfold with something closer to pity, because you start to realize they are far more defined by you than you have ever been defined by them. Their entire life and every choice they make seems to orbit around you. You make a move, they scramble to mirror it. You get an apartment, somehow they end up in one just like it. You wear a certain brand, they show up wearing it too, always under the pretense of, I just know how to do it better, I can handle it better, I can say it better. That is their fractured ego talking. Honestly, at a certain point, it becomes almost comical watching someone play a game like that and genuinely believe you will fall for it. It is proof, more than anything else, that they have no real identity of their own, no true self underneath all the performance. They either become a reflection of whatever they are mirroring, or they define themselves entirely through whoever they happen to be competing against at the moment. What strikes me most about this pattern, having watched it play out so many times, both professionally and in my own life, is how exhausting it must actually be to live that way. Imagine never having an original thought or preference that belongs entirely to you, always needing someone else's life as a reference point before you can decide what you want. That is not confidence. That is a kind of quiet desperation dressed up as superiority, and once you see it clearly, it becomes very hard to unsee. The third thing they do is launch what I would call a revenge campaign, which is a different animal entirely from ordinary smear tactics. By this point, it is worth being direct. Narcissists are, in a very real sense, demonically possessed. And here we are talking specifically about the demonic spirit of vengeance. You already know how vengeful and punitive they can be. They genuinely cannot sleep at night knowing that you are out there moving forward with your life and there is nothing they can do to stop it. So what happens next? They openly try to target you, to assassinate your character in whatever way fits the particular type of narcissist you are dealing with. The methods vary, but the underlying goal is always the same, to bring you down because you have inflicted a significant narcissistic injury on them, either by exposing who they truly are or simply by walking away. Let me share something personal here. Both of my own parents fit this pattern, my father as a malignant narcissist and my mother closer to a covert one. Together, they turned nearly every relative in our family against me. My father, always so overtly dramatic, even spread a lie, claiming I was struggling with drug addiction, that I did not know what I was talking about, that I had lost my mind, that I was surrounded by bad company, that I would not take their calls, that they had no idea what to do, all of it simply to project this image of a deeply concerned, worried parent. But in doing so, he stirred up genuine anger in people who believed him. My mother, meanwhile, played the role of the most pitiful victim imaginable, going on about how she raised me, how much she sacrificed, cataloging every single thing she supposedly gave up for me. The end result was that nearly every relative I had started reaching out to bash me, curse me, criticize me, for reasons that had nothing to do with reality, even people I had trusted deeply for years. That is exactly what a revenge campaign looks like from the inside. They quietly or openly orchestrate these campaigns purely to regain some sense of power. Looking back on that period of my own life now from a place of far more healing than I had then, I can see clearly how much that campaign was never actually about me at all. It was about them needing an audience to perform their pain and their righteousness, for needing witnesses who would validate the story they had constructed, because without that external validation, they would have had to sit alone with the truth of what actually happened, and that was never something either of them was equipped to do. So what should you actually do in a situation like that? Honestly, nothing. The people who fall for it and walk away from you, good riddance. They were never truly in your corner to begin with. They simply filtered themselves out. Just sit back and watch that narcissist end up shooting themselves in the foot by launching a revenge campaign against you, because eventually they expose their own true nature and plenty of people end up seeing straight through it. What I have learned since living through my own version of this is that revenge campaigns almost always burn out on a timeline you cannot control but can absolutely count on. The intensity that feels so overwhelming in the first weeks or months rarely sustains itself because maintaining a smear campaign takes enormous energy, and narcissists are not built for sustained effort toward anything that does not directly feed their ego. Eventually, the story gets old, the people who bought into it lose interest or start noticing inconsistencies, and the whole campaign quietly deflates. Your job during that stretch is simply to keep living your life with integrity, because integrity is the one thing a revenge campaign cannot successfully overwrite in the long run. The fourth thing they do is feign complete indifference. They will go silent. They will vanish entirely. They will stop speaking to you altogether, and the reason behind it is simple. They are trying to mask a badly wounded ego. They will act as though you cutting off contact has had absolutely no effect on their life whatsoever, as if your absence means nothing to them at all. They will flaunt a new partner, new possessions, staged photos with new people, all smiles and laughter, carefully posted across their social media for maximum visibility. In some cases, they might even get engaged within weeks of the breakup or married shortly after, posting pictures of a ring on their hand as if to say, "Did you really think I would stay stuck on you? Look how happy I am now." But here is the genuinely fascinating part. They are still completely defined by you in that exact moment. If they were truly moving on, truly building this wonderful, new, happy life, why would they still be performing it so loudly, so visibly, specifically for your benefit? Doesn't that reveal that they are actually more dependent on your reaction to them than you have ever been dependent on theirs? Of course it does. It is worth sitting with just how backwards that is from what genuine healing and moving forward actually looks like. Someone who has truly processed a loss and built a new life does not need a former partner to witness the proof of their happiness. They are simply living it, quietly for themselves. The need for an audience, specifically the audience of the person they claim not to care about anymore, gives away the entire performance. If you are still technically in contact somehow, they may stop responding to your messages or calls entirely, may even go quiet with your children, may simply cut everyone off completely, which often signals something I would call narcissistic hibernation. This happens when their ego has taken such a severe hit that they can no longer function in their usual optimal way, so they retreat into a kind of hiding, staying there until they feel strong enough again, until they have quietly accepted, even if they never say it out loud, that they cannot actually defeat you. What I want you to take from this particular pattern is how much it reveals about their inner world versus the world they present outwardly. The silence, the disappearance, the performance of not caring, none of it is evidence of genuine peace or genuine moving on. Real indifference does not need an audience. Real indifference does not require staged photographs and perfectly timed posts. The fact that they cannot simply live quietly and let your absence be your absence, that they need you to see how fine they are, tells you everything about how little peace they have actually found. The fifth and final thing they do is put on an exaggerated display of success. "Oh, I am so admired by everyone. Oh, people absolutely love what I have to say. I am the best. I am truly one of a kind. Nobody knows what I know. I am the favorite parent, the most loved person in the entire family. You do not even come close to comparing with me." They keep proving it, keep showing it off to anyone who will look at me, look at how admired I am by everyone around me. It is pure attention seeking, pure thirst for validation. Look at me, look at how wonderful my life is. And underneath that performance, they are usually trying to accomplish two things at once. First, to convince you they are not nearly as insecure as they actually are, to hide the shame sitting underneath everything. And second, to suggest that you are somehow wrong, that your success does not actually matter, that whatever you have to say is meaningless, that what you do simply does not count in comparison to what they do, which of course, in their mind, is far more valuable than anything you have accomplished. But if you step back for even a moment, if you look at the bigger picture honestly, you will probably find yourself laughing quietly at the whole display, thinking, wow, you are still so completely defined by my reaction to you. You still want to shape how I feel about you, and you still want everyone else around you thinking positively about you too, because it is all part of the same image management campaign, endlessly refining the picture they present to the world because they genuinely cannot tolerate a single ounce of criticism. And that is fine. Honestly, let them keep doing it, because the more they do, the more clearly people around them are able to see straight through the performance. They end up exposing exactly who they are all on their own without you having to lift a finger. There is something almost freeing in realizing this, because it means you no longer need to correct the record every time they exaggerate or perform for an audience. Their own behavior does the exposing for you consistently, reliably, over time, in a way that no argument from you ever could. People who are paying attention eventually notice the gap between the performance and the reality, and that gap only widens the longer the performance continues. That ultimately is the approach worth taking when you find yourself dealing with a narcissist who is nasty, defensive, and quietly defeated all at once. Do not engage with the games. Do not try to correct their version of reality. Do not spend your energy convincing people who have already chosen to believe a distorted story. Your growth, your peace, and your continued forward motion are already doing more to expose the truth than any argument or explanation ever could. Let their behavior speak for itself, and let your own life continue speaking for you in the meantime. Let me know your thoughts on all of this down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, as always, let the healing begin and continue.